Welcome to Dialogue here at E+ TV6 and a conversation with James Cherry. Among other things, his most recent work is Edge of the Wind. We want to talk about this book. We want to talk about writing and poetry and other things which he has done for a long, long time. I was reading the other day that Nat Turner was an American hero, and I said, okay, I got to talk to my friend James about this because that was not what I was told in school.
Yeah.
Okay, and so
what were you told?
That it was a slave insurrection, that a lot of innocent people were slaughtered, and that it was a bad thing, you know.
Well, Nat Turner is an American icon for the simple fact that as a preacher, he was very much familiar with the story of Moses leading the children of Israel out of bondage. And also, he grew up at a time after the American Revolution. Right. So he knew about Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. Right. And also his strategy as part of his insurrection was based on the American Revolutionary plan. He is very much woven into the American story.
You know, it's like the Whiskey Rebellion and other things in our history, and you realize in its early years that that the interpretation, as was the Civil War, the interpretation of what this union was, or what our duty to the collective central government was, on this other thing was one thing, and then of course the principle of freedom. Right. If you're a slave, not any easy way to get out of that. Right. He was executed, captured along with others. Yeah. But I guess it was an indication of what was to come. Right, with John Brown and other things. I mean, that there was unease and uncertainty about the presence of slavery and its role, and I think that troubled even Jefferson and others that knew, I think, in their heart, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, I don't think it's discussed very much, but several of the founding fathers, not all, but several of them owned slaves. Right. George Washington, Jefferson, you know. Yeah. And but I think Nat Turner's insurrection wasn't the only one. You know, according to historians, there were at least 250 or more. So you know, the slaves had a desire. I mean, they're living in the land of the free, right? And you know, they wanted to be free as well.
And so, like I said, we were going to have a horrendous war coming as a result of that and many other things. And so it's all part of our fabric. But I thought it was interesting. I said, well, I'll talk to my friend James and get that. I should have had you in my. I had a wonderful history teacher when I was in high school. Her name was Mary Jo Baldwin. She died just recently, taught all of her life as state single. But I really think in her heart, because I was in high school in the 60s, and then Miss Baldwin thought that we should have won that war. You know, I never really asked her, but I had that impression sometimes. Tell me about Edge of the Wind.
Okay, Edge of the Wind is my second novel, and it's based loosely on a hostage situation that happened at Dyersburg State Community College in 2003. I don't know if you remember that incident or not, but in that incident, a math class was taken hostage, and in my story, there's a literature class that's taken hostage. So some of the themes in the book, of course, is being a literature class, is art and poetry, and the protagonist in the book, he's off his meds, so mental illness comes to play, as well as race, and the hostages in the situation, their lives intertwined with the hostage taker, as well as the negotiator, who is the local sheriff. So there's a lot of dynamics at play.
Okay. Based on that situation, then?
Loosely based on
that situation. All right, so is there a theme to this, a point that you're wanting to make with this in telling the story?
Well, I guess the theme, the protagonist, he's been writing poetry. Okay. He's been kind of holed up in his sister's. He lost his job, and he lost his insurance, and of course he lost his medication. Okay. So he's been holed up in his sister's house, and he's been writing poetry. And he has a desire to find out if what he's been writing is any good. So he goes to this local community college, and they try to put him out because of his erratic behavior. But he pulls the gun and takes the class hostage. So on the surface, he wants poetry. But as the story develops, you find that he was abandoned by his father at a very young age. And so during the course of the story, the sheriff or the negotiator becomes kind of like a father figure to him. So on one level, it's about one thing, but on another level, it's about relationships and self-determination for one's life. Because everyone in the book, they want something. You know?
Edge of the Wind is the name of the book. It's getting good reviews.
So far, so good.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
How do you then get this work out? What's the technique in this business?
Well, whether you're published by a major New York publisher or a university press, such as my book, Stephen F. Austin State University Press, the publisher would do so much publicity, but ultimately you got to carry a stack of books in the back of your trunk and sell as many as you can. And of course, I'm thankful that you invited me on the show today, and it's basically getting out and getting the word out. And
how did you come to the attention of the university then with your head? Had they looked at your work before?
They did. In 2013, they published a collection of my poetry, Loose Change. So they were already familiar with me. Okay. They knew I was working on a novel, and they said, hey, we would love to take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then you send it off and then wait to see what happens.
Yeah.
That's always the scary moment, isn't it? I mean, you know, one thing I've always admired, you know, stand-up comedians, because they know instantly whether or not it's working.
That's true.
Or not. And I've thought I'd do a lot of things in my life, but that would be the most frightening, I would think, to go out there and be funny. Yeah. But you get to send it off and then you wait to see. Right?
Well, one of the qualities of any writer is persistence and patience. I mean, if every writer has been rejected at some point, there's very few writers that send things off the first time and get accepted. So if you send something off and it gets rejected, if you can say, you know, the heck with it, then maybe writing is not for you. But if you send something out and you get it back and you do some revision and you send it out and it comes back again and you revise again and you stay with it, eventually it will pay off. Yeah.
I've interviewed a lot of writers down through the years. I interviewed one time who was a sports writer out of Atlanta. I said, well, how did you get your work published? And he said, I didn't. He said, I had a friend who was an established writer that kept telling me, you need to write, you need to do this, do this. And he said, he called me one day and he said, hey, I've got your book sold. And he said, what book? And he said, that's my point. So he said his work was sold before he ever got it out, because it was like, now get out there and write that book, because I've pitched it and have gotten it sold. Yeah. What is the satisfaction in doing this to you?
Well, I never thought that I would become rich, you know, writing poetry and fiction, and so far that's paying down. But I think art is that which endures. And so eventually, or hopefully, I would like for my books to be read, you know, 30, 40, 50 years from now and sit on the same shelves with a Hemingway or a Richard Wright or Gwendolyn Brooks or someone that. So I think, you know, every writer wants to get paid, you know, that's a given, but I think ultimately you want to write something that's a lasting document and that will be around for a while.
So you write from the heart then?
I try my best.
Okay. I mean, I wondered, you know, I've thought about, I read this thing about Rembrandt one time, that he would take these commissions and sometimes they were very dissatisfied with his work because he had things in shadows and all this other stuff. If you're paying for this, you know, you want to be seen, right? And he would do this commission work. Of course, we consider them masterpieces. Now, it just took a while. It just took a while. James Cherry is with us. The book is called Edge of the Wind. We'll continue this dialogue here at E+ TV6. Welcome back to Dialogue here at E+ TV6. Edge of the Wind is the most recent work. It's a novel from James Cherry. We're talking about him. When you started this book, how much do you have? I mean, you got an incident in Dyersburg State, and then from this you're going to build this work. Do you know these characters when you start, or are they going to evolve for you?
Well, personally, it started with an image for me. Being having a hostage situation at a college was something that was very compelling about that whole, because, I mean, there's such a dichotomy there of contrast. And so
it was not an intentional thing. Somebody didn't go to take this class hostage. It evolves.
Right, exactly, right. Exactly. So once I kind of got an outline, a tentative outline, and developed the characters, I pretty much let the characters drive the story. And for me, that's the best fiction. I mean, if you write an outline and you're a stickler to that outline, the story can become stiff, and the writer gets in the way of the story. I learned that the hard way. So some free advice would be, once you develop your characters, let your characters drive the story. I mean, the character may want to go to Walmart, but you may want him to go somewhere else, but let him go ahead and go to Walmart and see what happens.
Okay.
You know. Yeah.
So then you're following the characters as you understand them.
Because it's characters in literature that we remember. You know, from Moby Dick is Captain Ahab, right?
Okay.
You know, The Catcher in the Rye is Holden Caulfield. Right. You know, Richard Wright, Bigger Thomas. So it's the characters that stay with us and become real to a certain extent.
What's the lead character in this?
The lead character in this book is Alexander Vanderpool. He's a 25-year-old black man who, like I said, he had been diagnosed earlier with schizophrenia in his life, and he had it under control. But once he lost his job and the insurance went with it, that's when he started having problems. So he moves back home with his sister, and things develop from there.
How did you come up with his name?
Well, I tried to avoid stereotypes as much as possible. Okay. So a black man with a name Vanderpool is about as anti-stereotype as you can get. So, I try to be as creative as possible in the process. Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, that's right. I mean, you can name this person anything.
Yeah,
and
true.
So that becomes.
I could have picked Jones, Smith, Washington.
Yeah. But Alexander Vanderpool.
Yeah.
So, all right, when you came up with that name, then, did that help you see him?
It did, but one of the things about writing fiction, a lot of times the characters are a compilation of different individuals. Okay. So once you start with that, then that's when you can actually write down and map out personality traits, height, weight, what they look, facial features. Okay. And so writing is a very magical thing. As you know, I mean, if you think about it, you start out with a blank screen, and before, at some point, you start creating a whole nother world. Right. Yeah. And so that's a very magical thing, and I don't know if it can be explained or whatever, but it's just a very
Did this flow all the way? Did you know where it was going to end when you started the book?
That's an interesting point. When I ended the book, the sheriff, the hostage negotiator, he tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, we're not through yet." And so I did a revision. Okay. And so this is the thing about writing. Once you finish the first draft, it's not finished. So you need the first draft is basically getting it all out
there.
Okay. And the work starts during the revising process, not editing. Revising and editing is two different things. Revision, you're actually making the story tighter and stronger. Okay. So during the revision process, I come up with the ending that's in the book.
So the sheriff is the one that says, we're not done yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Was it more about him or more about this story then?
Well, it was more about Alex, but before the story is over, he develops, because he's trying to get Alex removed from the situation.
Okay.
So before the story
So Alexander becomes Alex in this.
Yeah, he does. Okay. Short for Alexander. Okay. So, but before the story is over, there's this bonding that takes place because the sheriff's son was killed in an accident a year prior. So Alex is kind of looking for a father figure. Okay. The son, the sheriff lost his son.
Looking for one,
exactly.
Or finds one in this process. So you don't know how it's going to end when you start then. So you're writing pages. When you start a page, then where it's going.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So Robert Frost says that if there's no surprise in the writer, there won't be any surprise in the reader. Okay. Yeah. So, like I said, once you have an outline, and you will need an outline, you don't want to go, too far in the left field or whatever, but don't box yourself in. Surprise yourself.
Okay. Edge of the Wind is the name of the book, and we're talking with James Cherry, who is the author. How long did you work on this?
The book was actually my thesis for my MFA. I started a Master's of Fine Arts program online at Texas El Paso. Okay. It took me 3 years to complete the degree, and I was going part-time, so I guess I had laid some foundations for the book before I started the program, but it took me about 3 years to complete.
Was that character already in you, and comes out, or was it just like, okay, because as you talk about, it's a blank canvas, like an artist, it's a blank canvas. Yeah. But the moment you put a stroke there, you started. Now you can alter it, but there's that commitment point, right?
Well, I started thinking about the character when the incident happened at Dyersburg State.
Okay.
So, you know, writing, some of your best writing is actually done not in front of the computer or with a legal pad. Some of your best writing actually takes place in the thinking process. Okay. So you can actually think about a character or a story, and you're actually writing it without even knowing it. So when you sit down at the computer or with a legal pad or whatever, you're just further in the process.
Okay. Do you write out longhand, or do you do the word processing? Or?
Well, with my poetry, I write it longhand.
Okay.
I guess because it's more of an immediate, you know, a poem can be written in an hour or a day or whatever. But with my short stories and my fiction, I'm generally at a laptop. Or a computer. Yeah.
Does that make a difference in what you do?
I can't really explain it. I will say that poetry is more like a sprint, 100-meter sprint.
Okay.
And a story or a novel is more like a 5K or a marathon or something like that.
So like difference between drag racing and running
yeah,
NASCAR, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I just wonder if it allows you to do, I guess then the word processor allows a flow, maybe, that longhand.
Yeah.
Does that slow things down, or?
For me,
because with poetry, you're looking for, well, I guess you're always looking for precise words, but.
I guess with the computer, like I said, you have more, with poetry, imagery, and condensation. In other words, if you can say something with 5 words instead of 10 words in poetry, the stronger the imagery. Or in fiction, the margins are wider, or the boundaries are wider. Okay. So you have more flexibility. And more space, yeah.
Edge of the Wind is the name of the book. James Cherry is the author. We'll continue this dialogue here at E+ TV6. Welcome back to Dialogue at E+ TV6 as we continue a conversation with James Cherry. His book is called Edge of the Wind. It's a novel. It's published by Stephen F. Austin Press out of the university. The artwork on the cover.
Yeah. Well, that's the publisher came up with the artwork. Okay. I wanted a painting by Basquiat. You know, you familiar with Jean-Michel Basquiat?
Okay.
Who was But his estate said, no, you can't do it. so the publisher said, okay, we'll come up with a poor man Basquiat.
Okay, so they were kind of like I bought an oil painting one time, and someone said, well, that's a faux Monet. And I said, well, I'll take it, because I couldn't afford the real. I'll take a faux Monet any day and make it work. So this is a collaborative process to put all this out. I mean, you're not in total control of.
Well, once you submit your manuscript and they accept the work, they will make some editorial suggestions. And once you work through that process, the cover artist selected, they'll set a publication date, they'll set out some press releases for you and that type of thing. Right. So.
You do a good bit of work in poetry, and I wondered why, because poetry is not a mass-selling thing anymore, and I guess we have poets, but we talk about Robert Frost, and there was a time, I think, the poets expressed maybe on a larger scale. I don't know what our poetry is now, or if we have any. We may be looking for it out there, but as a total culture, and I know poets get angry with me when I say this, but I said, you know, I just don't know any, you know, and there are great ones out there, I'm sure, but there was a time that magazines and all that published poetry and did things. There's still some of that, but I just don't sense that it's our collective way of expressing ourselves any longer.
Well, poetry is alive and well. I think with today's technology, you know, you can publish your own work today, which is an advantage and a disadvantage, I guess. But poetry is alive and well. I think poetry will always be necessary. You know, there's a measurement in poetry called the I am, which is a unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. That's the same rhythm as the human heartbeat. So poetry is necessary.
It is us, right?
It is, exactly.
Have we fouled it up in our culture? And I wonder, it's kind of like in the good book, you know, you rest every 7 days, okay? We do 24/7, 365, and we've altered that rhythm, I think.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we've done this same thing. It's noisy, it's cluttered, it's busy, it seems to me.
And not only that, we're in a capitalist society, and art in general is considered non-essential a lot of times.
Yeah.
So, you know, we don't put a premium on the arts like maybe we should, but just think of our lives without the ballet, and without the symphony, without jazz and blues concerts and things like that. So art and poetry,
it is us.
Exactly. It enhances, you know, who we are.
Because I wondered, you know, there was one of the early members of Fleetwood Mac, I think his name was Green. You know, the moment he had a hit in his career, he felt like he had compromised himself. You know, he attempted to shoot the guy that was going to deliver his royalty check, and got out of the band when it started becoming commercially successful. And I wonder about that struggle. I don't know, because we look, you know, you want people to buy this, right? You want it to be commercially successful. You want it to be, you know, let's make it into a TV movie. Let's do something, right? All that out there. But then at the same time, that's not the point.
Right.
It's not like, well, I failed if it doesn't become a TV movie, right, or a big screen production or whatever.
I think what you're getting at is integrity in the art. So, you know, the question becomes, what are you writing for?
Right.
If you're just writing a bunch of trash for the money, you know, of course, that's not going to last, and that won't be respected. But, you know, like I mentioned earlier, artists want to be paid, but I think also there's some integrity and some standards that need to be addressed as well.
Because I was wondering, you know, when you write poetry, it's not like I'm going to sell 9 million copies of this, unless somebody takes it and makes it a song or something, right?
Well, most poets and most writers in general, they teach. You know, you take somebody like Nikki Giovanni, who's a very celebrated poet. She teaches at Virginia Tech because she can't make a living writing poetry. I mean, in our economy, you know, poetry just doesn't sell like.
But I guess in many ways, right, if you go back Middle Ages or whatever, they were dependent on kings or barons or lords or whatever to write. To support the artists or the writers or the religious people. I mean, they had to be protected in some cases, right? So it's always been that balance.
Yeah, and you know, poetry is back then the art was spoken, so there's always been an element of spoken word, which is kind of popular today, where you may go to a coffee house and people get up and recite their original poems or famous poems or whatever. So I think a form of poetry will always be around in some form or shape.
And you say it follows the human heartbeat.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That it does. Rhyming and not rhyming.
That's part of the beauty of it. I mean, if a poem doesn't rhyme, that doesn't mean it's less of a poem. But in poetry, the key theme is imagery. And of course, imagery is built through metaphor and simile. And so if the imagery, if you can read a poem, define the last word of a poem, and that poem is still with you, then the poet has done his job.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the length?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, right? You wonder because, you know, and so sometimes, how do you know when a poem is finished then?
Well, there's something innate that artists know. I mean, it's if you ask a painter, how does he know his work is finished? He couldn't tell you. But it's just something that
whatever that last stroke
is.
Yeah,
it's the creative process that hey, this is what I've had to say, and I'm finished.
Okay. What are you working on now?
Actually, I'm working on a book of poems about biblical characters. Characters such as David, Moses, Adam. You know, I'm attempting to go from Old Testament, New Testament, and these are characters that it's not so much a spiritual book as it is a book that shows how these people were spiritual heroes, but they were also human beings. You know, David, he was a man after God's own heart, but he also had this guy, this woman's husband killed and slept with her. So
I think about that. You know, because we want to categorize people in this life. It's like, well, he did this. He could never be a pastor or whatever. I said, this man wrote the 23rd Psalm, right?
That's right.
And had a man killed after an affair with his wife. And
but it shows the human quality
of that.
You know, these people weren't way up here or any better than we are.
But we seem to want our folks to be that way, and they never have been. That's one thing that impresses me about the scriptures is, you know, it must be real because these people are not presented in a flattering Things right. Yeah, I said, one thing, when you see in that book, when God issues a call, most of them say, you've got to be kidding, right?
Look
like
at Moses.
Yeah, like, send my brother, send anybody.
Right, yeah.
Jonah just runs off.
That's right.
Runs off. Well, good luck with that. It'll be fascinating to see.
Thank you.
Yeah. James Cherry, his most recent work is called Edge of the Wind, Stephen F. Austin Press, and this is a novel, his second. Where do people find your work? What's the best way to do it?
Any bookstore, of course, Amazon, Barnes and Noble online.
And your books of poetry and everything else are out there?
Yeah.
All right, continue, Beth.
And my website is jamesecherry.com.
jamesecherry.com. It's a pleasure to see you. Appreciate the time very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, and stay with us here at E+ TV 6. This is the place where the dialogue continues.